Your boy's getting married. And of course, although I love the idea that I'm getting married to my fiance, comes along with a lot of stress prepping for this wedding. And one of the things that doesn't need to be stressful, or shouldn't be in my eyes, is the process of designing and sending out your wedding invitations. I was recently playing around with Basic Invite, probably a little later at night than I should have. Had a pretty long day, and I was insanely frustrated by how difficult it was to do basic things, like add people to an address book so I can send them an invite, or just like simply customize it so I can move to the next step in the process. So, vindictively, we're going to redesign Basic Invite's wedding invitation flow today. Here we go. We've got their brand guideline, really beautiful color arrangements with the gold and the kind of weird shade of blue. I don't really know how to describe this. And obviously they're using Avenir for a font. Very simple, thin lettering, gives them that kind of premium, fancy feel. They also have a couple of other fonts on the site, some serif fonts that they're using in full uppercase to kind of generate a very specific kind of aesthetic, but we're gonna abandon that for the sake of simplicity here and just stick with Avenir, see how that looks. But there's a couple of things I want to do with this UI specifically, and it's build and send wedding invites to my friends and family, right? That's the main goal. But of course, in order to do that, I need to select a template, add in all the text, select the colors, things like that. I also want to quickly and easily enter their name and address details into an address book for maybe this invite or a follow-up invite for a vow renewal in 10 years or something. I want to do that in bulk if necessary. Verify that everything's correct. Obviously, if I'm spending a couple $100 sending out invites, I want to make sure that they're all going to the right people and there's no spelling errors, and then just check out when I'm ready. Of course, I want to visit my account settings and cart, but that's all largely secondary. So, gonna get stuck in here, got a bunch of reference images. We're just gonna map the flow of, I've selected a template. I'm gonna just go through and build the invite and then add the invitees to a list, save it to my address book perhaps, and then check out. So that's all we're gonna kind of handle today for the sake of simplicity, because that's really where the bulk of the pain was in the flow. And yeah, gonna get stuck in, and I'll see you guys in a few hours. Also, please don't judge me for all the boxes in the background. I know it's embarrassing, but it's Sunday. I can't be fucked to go and move them. I spent a truly absurd amount of time on this header navigation, probably about an hour and a half. So I'm not going to make you watch the whole thing, even sped up. But the one takeaway I do want to express here is that there did seem to be a little bit of an incongruency between the way the logo was typed and the navigation items themselves were typed. And I've noticed this tends to be the case in situations where companies have a text-based logo. If you use different styles for the logo and then the navigation items, if you place them close to each other, it looks very jarring. So ultimately what I decided to do is make all the navigation items fully lowercase to mimic the logo type. That way everything feels really consistent. And then the implication that it's a link is just kind of underscored by the fact that they're smaller, lighter text than the logo itself. You're probably noticing a problem which I later address in the redesign, and it's that there's just a lot of text links in the header that seem to look very similar to each other. Obviously, this is a problem because a user is going to have a difficult time disambiguating between which ones they should click on and which ones are just there to explain the context of the page, and ultimately solve this by adding various different separators with color boxes and, line items. But you'll see that later when I come back and do some polish. One of the main usability problems I noticed with this flow is that there was just no visual indicator to me as the person building the invite how far along I was in the process of building the invite, right? And that is often quite stressful for users. They don't know how many steps there are. They're just going to keep clicking next. They're just getting frustrated. So telling the user where they are in the flow and how much farther they have to go is an important part of any kind of multi-step flow in one contained context. So just kind of adding the step descriptor here, I think, makes a significant impact on the user experience. Another improvement that I made here was making it more obvious that there's more than one side that you can customize, and allowing the user to select which side they want to customize on the left kind of implies that they're selecting the face before they actually do the customization, which is intuitive, it's logical. So placing those controls on the left makes a lot of sense, and it's also visually much more clear to the user that there's more to customize than they might be seeing in this initial image. It makes sense that if you're going through and building a wedding invite like this, you probably aren't going to do it all in one sitting, and you're probably not ready to buy in that same sitting. So adding a Save for Later button made a lot of sense, and that already exists on basicinvite.com today, so we're just porting that over to the new UI. And here you're seeing me fix all of those issues I was alluding to at the start of the video. There's a lot of text links floating on a slightly gray background. So really what I'm doing here is breaking everything up into its kind of logical container so that your eye focuses on the correct element in the correct context and isn't just looking at a whole bunch of random text on the page. Something that I think a lot of folks overlook when they're designing an experience is the fact that the user, at least on desktop, is using a mouse. So hover states can be used to imply more information about a UI than is given intuitively on the screen. And here I'm using that heuristic to indicate to the user that they can just click on this image to change the text. And you can do that today anyway. It's just more intuitive and explicit in the UI I'm building here. Generally speaking, whenever you have a form like this, you don't want people to be using drop-downs, especially on mobile. If you can get away with just using some kind of visual representation of the options, like here we're actually showing what the envelope would look like, that's a big win for user experience, because it's a very explicit and tangible contract with the user. If you click this button, you're going to get an envelope that looks like this, as opposed to a drop-down that says return address only or something. And here I'm kind of scratching my head, trying to figure out how I can display a list of contacts which users can then select from to specify the recipients of the invite. I ultimately decide on giving users a modal to do this because the expectation is that there is some other external part of the application, their address book, with which they're interfacing to select these contacts. So presumably they can interface with the address book from anywhere else in the application, not just here. So it doesn't make sense to have a dedicated UI, and a modal overlay makes a lot more sense.
Cause the whole world outside, sun in my eye, a girl in my ride.
Of course, users are still going to need a quick and easy way to solicit the addresses from their recipients. If they haven't just asked them explicitly, it's nice to just send them a link and say, hey, type this in yourself, and that way there's no more liability for mistyping it. It's all in the hands of the recipient themselves. So I really like this idea that they had of just giving the users a custom link that they can send to their guests and importing that over here. Of course, trying to indicate that it's optional and you can just add context manually through the controls below this, but adding in the background color and making it green like this kind of implies that it's a special use case that you can use to speed up your experience using this UI.
I'm on a natural high, just like the east side rise. My ass is sunny side, it's up to you to decide. Get on my level, tell the devil go somewhere and hide.
Here I'm giving users a previous and next button that they can use to cycle through a real interpretation of their contacts on the envelope. That way you can go through and confirm everything in context if you want. You can just cycle through every single one of them and see the actual name and address and return address on the envelope before you go ahead and spend a couple $100s on these envelopes. So really quick and easy way to just go through and quickly cycle through all of the options there. Creating the address book modal here, and I'm immediately very cautious about how I'm displaying data here. Whenever you put something into a modal, you're already working with a much less flexible medium, and if you put something like rich content such as a table in there, you really have to be careful about how you do it and consider lots of edge cases, like what if there's way too many rows in this table? How are we going to handle pagination and search and stuff like that? So this modal actually took me, I think, about an hour to build in real life, and that's because there's just so much care you have to put into a modal experience to make it work, especially on mobile. Unfortunately, we're not even tackling that beast in this UI here. But just want to give users a simple way to take contacts that exist in their address book and assign them to this invite, and then perhaps add a new user here as well, or a new contact to their list. So this modal's doing a lot, and the way that I got all those functions in there is very nuanced. But the real thing I want to communicate here is I took a lot of time and just stepping back and looking at this modal and saying, does this work, and does it let me enable me to do the things that I want the user to do here? Yeah, this was a beast. You can see me doing this in real time because you're watching me realize and think to myself, how would I find a specific user in this list? I'd need some way to search, and now I'm adding search. And now I'm thinking, what if I just want to add someone that I have in an Excel spreadsheet somewhere to this list? There's no way to do that, so I have to add an add recipient button, or excuse me, an add contact button. So you're just watching me kind of go through and think about pragmatically and with as little bias as humanly possible, like, does this actually functionally resolve the problems that the user's trying to solve with this UI? And the answer was no for a very long time here. And finally, I'm just going through and adding some consistency to the UI. We've kind of established the heuristic of adding these thin lines as borders to things, but not this table, so gotta add it there as well. I'm doing the thing again. I'm doing the thing where I just endlessly try and tweak tiny little things to make the UI just like marginally better. In reality, you wouldn't get to do this, right? Like someone would tell you have to stop. So I'm gonna be that person in this case here. But ultimately, I think we have a much more kind of sensible approach here to customizing an invite and then sending them out to specific recipients. Everything's kind of contained inside this stepped process where I get to do everything that is necessary. I customize the invite, select the envelope, type in my return address, and then select the recipients and populate the array of people that are going to receive the email, or excuse me, receive the invite, all in one place before I add it to the cart. So I know exactly what I've done, and I can confirm everything by looking through all of the different recipients. Before I actually pay $1 for anything. So I think all things considered, this would just be a simpler flow. I will concede that a lot of the problems I had with Basic Invite were kind of on the engineering side of things. Things just took a long time to load. There wasn't live text editing on the customization screen. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for just baseline improvements there. But this was fun for me, and it was a good way for me to relieve the tensions I had built up because this site gave me such a headache a couple of weeks ago. I hope you found this one useful, and I hope that you took a little nugget of design knowledge from it. If you have any thoughts on this design or anything else you'd like me to redesign in the next coming weeks, drop a comment as always, and I'll be sure to pop it on the backlog. But appreciate you watching, folks. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next Wednesday.